Welcome back. There is just one feature which is left in this specific app to really make it a complete app. That's basically the add to do. I mean, there are a lot of stuff around security that we'll discuss a little later. And also, we did not really talk about database until now, so we need to add JPA and stuff a little later. But from the features perspective, from the actual functionality perspective, let's look at adding a to do right now. So let's add a button here for adding a to do, and let's call the post method to create a new to do, and let's get that going. Let's go to Visual Studio Code and let's start with creating a new button. Cool. Let's take the button that we already created, and what I'll do is over here at the bottom of this specific table, I'll create another div and say class is equal to row and have my button down there, and this would actually add to do. So add to do, add, and I would want it to be success, right? Why do we really want it to be warning? Cool. Let's see the page. Pretty decent. Now let's create the add to do method. Where do we implement it? To do's dot component dot ts is where it would go. What we would want to do is add to do, and to add a to do, we don't really need to have anything right now. So what we'll do is we'll just take the user to the to do's page. However, for the add to do, what I'll do is I'll pass the ID as -1. So in our application, let's have all the IDs to be positive, and when the ID is -1, let's assume that user is trying to do add to do. This would help us to reuse the to do component that we have already created. So now when I click add to do, what happens? Oops, right click, inspect, and error. What error is it? Compilation error. Let's see what it is all about. Cannot read property ID of undefined. What is happening? When I click add to do.id. Aha, that's the problem. What we did was when we copy pasted it, we forgot to actually remove the to do.id. For an add to do, we don't really need a to do.id, right? So let's fix that, and let's get back to where we were. Let's add. Okay, cool. Now I'm able to go to the next screen. The thing is, if you look at the console, you would see that there is an error. It says cannot read description of null. And if you go to the network, go back and add. Let's clear the console right now. Let's try and add a to do, and you'd see that there is a request going into -1. So this is not really good because this is actually firing a request. Why is it firing a request? Because that's what we told it to do in to do.component.ts. We are trying to load the to do.component.ts, and what does the to do.component.ts do? When you pass in an ID, it actually tries to call the retrieve to do. What I'll do is over here, we said this.id is equal to, we got the ID from the parameters, and over here we created it with a hard-coded 1. Instead of that, I think it's a better thing to do this.id in here, so that we use the ID which is coming in to create the to do. The other thing which we want to do is we would only want to call this if to do is, if the to do ID is not a specific value. So if this.id not equal to -1, only then you would want to call this specific thing. So I'll put this in if, so that when it's a new to do, you don't really need to call the retrieve to do service to get the details of it. And the other thing is when we do a save, we need to exactly do similar condition. So if this.id is equal to -1, then what do we need to do? We would not need to actually call a update. We would need to call a create. Else we would need to call a update. So let's format this and get this right. Over here we would need to call a create to do. So if to do.id is equal to -1, then create, otherwise update. And same thing down here as well. So over here we are saying this.id is equal to, we are getting it from the URL parameters or the route parameters, and we are creating a default to do to represent it while we are getting it from the service. And if the ID is not -1, then we will need to get it. Otherwise, we are creating a new to do, so we don't really need to get the values from the database. Let's see if this is all working out fine. Now, to do -1, okay, I don't see any errors down here, that's cool. This is the defaults that I would want to see. To do 1, cool, I'm seeing the details of 1. So both of them are working fine. Let's go back to do -1 because that's what we would want to focus on, the new to do. Now, if I click save, we don't really have anything implemented yet, because if to do dot if this dot id is equal to -1, we need to create the to do, but we have not done it yet. Creating the create to do is very similar to the update to do, right? So create to do, and you don't need to pass an ID, and the URL would not have the ID as well, and instead of the put, it's a post. That's cool. Now let's go back to our to do component and make a call. So how do we make a call? This is create to do. I don't need to pass in the ID. When there is data coming back, I would just need to log it, and I would need to route it back to the to-dos. That's cool. So we don't really need to do anything else. Let's look at it right now. Let's wait for the whole thing to refresh. I guess it has already refreshed. And let's enter learn microservices again and save. Cool. Let's see if I have learn microservices again down here. Cool. I see learn microservices again down here. That's awesome, right? Now I'll close this and let's try and update this. So you can see that it was assigned an ID of 4. Let's update it, learns again 4, save. Cool. You can try and test it a little more, and now we have most of the features that we would want. We have the update feature, delete feature, and we can add a new to do as well. Congratulate yourself, and I'll see you in the next step.